Hi, I'm Bill Robertson. I'm a local author, and also I used to teach a creative writing class at Bradford High School years ago. And one of the assignments I always gave the kids really went over well. And today I'd like to share it with you. And also I'd like to invite you to do some stories and bring them down to the Bradford Public Library, because we're going to also make this into a contest. And there's going to be one category for adults and one category for teenagers. And each person will win a copy of my More Stories from the Olden Days book, which is a funny look at growing up in Bradford back in the 50s and 60s. A lot of people have really enjoyed this book, and I think it'll be a good gift because the assignment you'll be doing is very humorous. And I've tried this with people of all ages, and people have always loved this particular assignment, so here you go. And what I call it is the colorful character writing assignment. Invent a colorful character by combining two known personalities and write a humorous story about him or her. You could create your own superhero, monster, alien from outer space, rock star, rap star, movie star, sports hero, supermodel, or political figure. A picture of your character must be included. And that's important. A picture of your character must be included. Describe your character in detail in paragraph 1. Give the color of his hair and eyes. Give his height or weight. Give any unusual or distinctive features to show how pretty or disgusting your character is. Also, tell what powers your character has. The rest of your essay will tell your character's story. You could tell what he did to become famous. You could discuss the romance or marriage of your character. You could give some of your character's childhood or school experiences. You could describe the showdown between your character and his biggest enemy. You could tell how your character was killed, if that's appropriate. All right, and I'd like to read now an assignment that I actually did, or a little story that I did, to give you an idea of what I'm kind of looking for. And my character that I created is Burnett Parker. And it's a combination of Carol Burnett, the comedian and singer, and Dave Parker, the baseball player. And of course, having a wacky personality like this leads to all sort of funny possibilities. Okay, and here's the story I came up with. Anybody's a fan of the Pittsburgh Pirates is going to love this, because Dave Parker, the Cobra, was a very famous player in their history. Was also a World Series MVP. And of course, a lot of people loved Carol Burnett and the Carol Burnett show back in the day. Combine the two, we have Burnett Parker. Burnett Parker, former right fielder for the Pittsburgh Poor Rats, is by far one of baseball's most colorful celebrities. Born in Pennsylvania in 1951, he bats left, sings right, and throws up. His powerful 6'5" frame is packed with 285 solid pounds. This excess weight is very useful in crashing through fences to chase down home run balls. He chose uniform number 39, by the way, because that is how many pounds he attempts to gain each month of the ball season. Burnett has won many honors during his illustrious baseball career. He was, for example, the National Batting League champ in 1978 and 1979. The first year he won the title by catching the most fruit bats in the dugout during rain delays. During the 79 season, he was cited for breaking the most bats after striking out. He was also the best defensive player in the league until he won his first gold glove, which he now unfortunately wears in the field. In 1983, he was unanimous choice for the most offensive player when he went 210 consecutive games without showering. This award was what most convinced him to turn communist and defect to the Reds this year. The all-star performer has also made a number of impressive television appearances. These include singing the national anthem after ball games, and doing commercials for Kentucky Fried Catcher's mitts. His spot role in the movie The Unnatural was also exceptional. Probably Burnett's best performance, however, occurred in the 7th game of the 1979 World Series. With bases loaded and only one out in the 9th, Mahler Murray of the Baltimore Old Rios stepped to the plate and smashed a screaming liner into the right field corner. Parker was so busy doing one of his comedy routines and dodging the radio batteries thrown by his adoring fans that he never saw Murray's wicked line drive bearing down on him until it was too late. Fortunately, his mouth popped open in surprise, and the ball lodged in his gullet for the second out. In the meantime, the runner at third tagged up and headed for the plate to score the tying run. At that moment, Burnett got jolted by another battery, causing him to spit the ball toward the infield. The ball had such velocity that it sailed right into the catcher's outstretched glove. The runner was tagged out, and Burnett Parker was mobbed by his victorious teammates. Afterward, he was named MVP, most voiceless player of the World Series, for his heroics. So again, I add a lot of humor, take a lot of things I know about Parker and some of the things he accomplished, twisted them all around to make them humorous. And actually, he did defect to the Reds because he started playing for the Cincinnati Reds at the end of his career. He left the Pirates, and so he became a communist. Some of the other colorful characters I kind of thought of that are more up to date, perhaps. If, for example, you like people who are in the movies and people who are in the entertainment field, it'd be kind of neat to combine two of those personalities. And the two that I combine was Boy George and Clint Eastwood. So we have Boy Eastwood, and he could sing not "Do you really want to hurt me?" but "I really want to hurt you." And again, this gives you an idea of some of the stuff you could do to create some humor. Okay, another interesting personality that I come up with, Michael Jackson always wanted to be bad. So why not combine Al Capone and Michael Jackson together so you have Michael Capone. Now he can really be bad and do a lot of crazy gangland stuff instead of, prancing around the video. And finally, if you are into politics pretty heavy, this is one I came up with. Nancy Trump. Nancy Pelosi head on Donald Trump's body. And there's all kind of possibilities for that for humor. And I won't really get into that because I don't know which side of the political aisle you sit on, but you get the idea. Okay, also, too, I wanted to talk about some comic techniques that you could use to add humor to your essay. First of all, you could use hyperbole. And what that means is it's exaggeration where you stretch the truth. Think of a fish story where you caught a bass about this big, but by the time you get done telling the story, it was a real whopper. It was the state record of Pennsylvania. And again, by stretching the truth, you can make a lot of funny things happen. Another comic technique would be understatement. Make something important into something unimportant by mentioning it as an afterthought. And I have a good example of that from my college days. I had a friend, his name was Mike Major. We used to call him the Scrounge. He was the funniest man walking on campus, I swear. And one of his favorite things to do would be to start talking about a current topic that had everybody fired up, and he'd give his opinion, his strong opinion, and when he was doing it, he'd use every filthy word in the book. He even invented some swear words to, again, get across this point about how he was, really into this particular topic, and if anyone didn't like what he said, he would jump all over that person and call them all kinds of names and again invent swear words. And then when he was done with that tirade, it would go on for 20 minutes. Then he'd go, "Thank you." And we just crack up and roll on the floor because he spent, 20 minutes, jumping all over everybody and making fun of everything he could and using all these swear words. And then at the end, "Thank you." Never forget that as long as I live. Okay, another comic technique you could use is the unexpected. When something happens that you don't think is going to happen. And I can give a good example of that from my teaching career. The first year I taught, I was teaching a comedy class, and they were mini courses at the time. It was a 6-week mini course that the kids could elect. And so I started talking about comic techniques that day. Before I got into my presentation, I looked around the room and took roll like you're supposed to do. And I noticed that one kid wasn't in my class that day, and I thought, oh, he's a really good kid. He wouldn't have skipped or anything. He must just have a band lesson this period. So I started talking about my comic techniques, and all of a sudden, he jumped out of the closet and went, ah! And all the kids just broke out laughing. And I said, no, instead of jumping on the kid's neck or jumping down the kid's neck and cussing at him or whatever and telling him to get to the office, I said, now there's a perfect example of using the unexpected for humor. Thank you, Bob. Have a seat. And I just went over, it's like I planned the whole thing. So he was doing it, try to pick on me a little bit, and I just turned it right around on him, and the kids just loved it. It was really funny. And that's another thing I'll never forget, that particular incident. Okay, another comic technique that you could use is slapstick comedy. And that's physical comedy that the Three Stooges specialized in. If you remember them, they're always poking each other, punching each other, slapping each other in the face, knocking each other down. And the one guy tried to poke the guy in the eyes, and he put up his fingers like that, and he'd go like that, and then the guy go, and then he'd poke him in the eye. I mean, stuff like that really goes over well, too, if you can come up with some humorous slapstick comedy. Okay, also funny language goes a long way to creating humor. For example, you can say witty things like using puns. One of my favorite puns is, he was so bright they call him Sonny. Also, you could misuse words like Slip Mahoney of the Bowery Boys. And the Bowery Boys was an old comic. It was like a program that was on Saturday mornings a lot of times. And Slip Mahoney, they called him that because he was always slipping. He had the slip of a tongue all the time. And he was trying to use words that he didn't know the meaning of. For example, he would say, I tried to defy the word, but I couldn't. And what he meant was, I tried to define the word. And he was always doing that, using words wrong, and everyone just laughed, and thought that was hilarious. Also, you could use dialect in your story, like Southern dialect, like people are always saying you all, and all that kind of stuff. Or you could use maybe a Pittsburgh pronunciation of words. Up here we say we're going downtown. In Pittsburgh they say, hey, we're going downtown today. If you could use some of that in your story, a lot of times you get some really, funny reactions from it. Also, another comic technique is the absurd, foolish, or ridiculous. To say something so stupid that people laugh. And as an example, I could, read the poem, Old Bill was a good old man. He washed his feet in a frying pan. He combed his hair with a wagon wheel and died with a toothache in his heel. And again, everything's so stupid there, you have to laugh. Also, satire is another technique that really works well to get people to laugh. In other words, what you do in satire is point out man's foolishness by using sarcasm or ridicule, like they do in Mad Magazine all the time. They especially are good at taking a movie and then, poking fun at it. And my favorite one of those was Kung Fu, was the television series that was so cool. And what they did is their version was Kung Fu. And then they would make fun of the guy. Instead of him, beating up all the bad guys using karate and stuff, he'd fall over his feet, and it was really hilarious. Another example would come from the Christmas Mad Magazine that just came out. And I love this. I still buy it. I'm an old guy, but I still love the humor that's in here. And the one they did for this particular issue was the Christmas Story, which is on every Christmas, endlessly on TBS from early in the morning all the way to the midnight, And they call it a listless story and poke fun of, Ralphie and all the gang. Ralphie wanted to shoot, he wanted a Red Ryder BB gun, and his mother kept saying, you're going to shoot your eye out. I think in this episode he actually does shoot his eye out. It's really hilarious how they, can take a known movie and then poke fun of it by using satire. Okay, another comic technique is an anachronism. And an anachronism, I can't even hardly say it. It's one of those long $10 words. Anachronism is something placed or occurring out of its time. In other words, where you talk about something that hasn't even happened yet. For example, if any of you remember that old funny song, The Troglodyte, by the Jimmy Castor Bunch from the 70s, where he says, here we are looking in on this caveman at home, listening to a stereo. And of course, there's obviously no stereos in caveman times. And if you can, again, use that sort of technique, you can make people chuckle. And finally, you can use funny names. Like Edgar Allan Poe, for example, in one of the stories that he wrote to satirize the rich upper class people of his time, called the one lady Mrs. Pirouette, because obviously she was all into dancing, and that was her thing. And that's all, because she was so rich, that's all she had to do. Another one was Mr. Tattle, who spent all of his time gossiping about the other people. And of course, Mrs. O'Trump, who was always playing whist and other card games because she was so rich she didn't have to do anything else. So again, that's another way that you can, add some humors by using funny names in your story. Okay, this again, we're hoping to get as many entries as we can, and we'll give you a month to, submit some stories to the Bradford Area Public Library. You can bring them down, and again, we're looking for a satiric story or a funny story where you combine two known personalities and create your own character out of them. And in the first paragraph, you describe your character, give his physical appearance, talk about his background, and then after that, you're going to tell the story about your character. And it's simple but fun. And I've used this with 11th graders, and I've used this with 8th graders, and every class I ever used it with, they loved it. And again, you can come up with your own wild character, Boy Eastwood, or Michael Capone, or anyone you can think of. And the whole idea is it's all up to you. I'm sure there's two people you either love or hate that you could combine together for humor. So good luck to everybody, and I hope a lot of these stories come rolling in, because I'll be anxious to read them, because I think it'll be funnier than heck. It'll make my day, and we need to have some humor in this world, so the more funny stories we get, the better. All right, thank you very much for your time.